This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses.
So a little bit of story time today, because it's been quite a cool couple of days, a few interesting experiences. First of all, thanks to Jake for asking me to step in for a couple of tunes on this gig at Firehouse in Exeter. And second of all, what was really cool is that Mick from that pedal show is kind of mates with Jake, and he also sat in on a few tunes. And as a result, I got a chance to play through his rig. Now, Mick is a super nice guy, by the way, really enthusiastic about live music, really enthusiastic about guitar and stuff like that. Really top bloke. So, first of all, thanks, Mick, for letting me play through your awesome gear. And you're not going to watch this anyway, but super nice guy. Really cool. So Jake sends me the video the morning after, because when you're playing in these things, and I get a little bit of like nerves and stuff like that. Still, I'm not the most outgoing bloke. The cool thing is that I've played the same song a couple of times. So I think we did a gig back in, February, where we did the same sort of setup. But basically, I just jump on stage and play a couple of tunes with whatever amp is there. The first time, basically, Jake had just borrowed my Boss Angry Driver, so he had it in his car so that when I jumped up on stage, I could plug into his Fender Vibreverb with a 15-inch speaker and his Gibson Murphy Lab Les Paul, right? So that's rig one. It's the Murphy Lab, which has custom buckers in it, doesn't it? Into the Angry Driver, into the Fender Vibreverb. And I think I was probably using the Angry Driver in like stacked mode. So that is essentially a blues driver into a JHS Angry Charlie, which is like a Marshall in a box thing, right? Mick's rig is pretty awesome. I was playing my K-line Strat with Lolliday Blondes into, he has a Nordvang Gravity, which is a TS1 and a Klon, two pedals in one, basically. And then he had a Universal Audio, I think it's called the Delverb, like the blue one. A couple other things on this board, but I wasn't using those. And then that goes into a 2-Rock TS1. Now, I didn't change any of the knobs on it, and I was kind of excited to see what it sounded like, and kind of wondering, obviously, like, there's a bunch of aspects of that rig which are kind of like holy grail, a 2-Rock TS1, based on a Dumble overdrive special, and in its own right, a very expensive, very sought after amp. I was actually looking at a TS1 head at one point earlier in the year, and then I look back at the videos and it kind of sounds unmistakably like me, and I was kind of bored at the time of hearing what I sound like through either rig, to be honest with you. So I don't know if that's just a reflection of where I'm at thinking about how I play in these scenarios anyway. Because if you said to me, like, what would you sound like playing through a Murphy Lab into a vibroverb with a Boss angry driver, I might have some idea. And then if you said to me, what would you sound like playing through a Strat into a Nordvang Gravity, so with the two sides stacked, into a Two-Rock TS1, in my head, those are fairly distinct sounds, right? One has a 1x15, one has a Marshall in a box type tone, and then the other is, I don't know, more of a John Mayer based rig, right? And in either case, it just kind of sounds like me. What I'm starting to think is there's like this sort of continuum of tone in a way. Tone is a continuum, I guess, anyway. But the things that I am kind of thinking about that are important here are amount of gain on the one hand, and then sort of clarity on the other hand. So those kind of go hand in hand, but, you know, maintaining an amount of gain so you've got sustain and that sort of thing is important to me. And where that clarity, how much you're heard thing is kind of important to me as well. Because if there's too much clarity for me, I think you get like quite fizzy, unpleasant tones. I'm looking for round tones. But on the other hand, you don't want to be so smooth sounding that it doesn't cut through and you have to have loads of volume. So that's kind of been a bit of a revelation for me, because when people say, and I get comments like saying this, you know, you sound the same playing everything. To me, that's sort of a bit of a failure if you're demoing gear, right? Because the idea, in theory, is to try and show the differences between pieces of gear and maybe let the piece of gear itself tell its own story through its tone if it has one of those. But unfortunately, such is my penmanship that if you give me a Strat and a Les Paul, even if I'm not the one dialing in the knobs, apparently I sound basically the same. So that's how story time's going. Anyway, as I say, Mick, lovely bloke, and I've actually got a fuzz face that I want to demo later on, so hopefully that's going to sound a little bit different. But the Nordvang Gravity, to me, it sounded pretty cool. And of course, another thing to mention is that this is obviously through like camera audio, so there's not a great way to really evaluate tone. But in general, that's kind of what I'm hearing. And if I go through other clips of other bits and pieces, it's like I basically sound like that through my modelling rig as well. I don't know, it does mean that I'm probably not going to go out and buy either a Two-Rock or a Vibroverb, because frankly, it kind of just sounds like me. One thing that I was thinking was like, are there things that would sound distinctly different? Something like a Vox AC30, would that be something that I could not get this sort of tone through? But then I think like the Dexter is what I use on gigs at the moment, and that is a bit of a brighter tone. But once you start putting the gain through it that I use to do this sort of stuff, it does start to kind of coalesce into this one sort of chordy sound. I don't know. That's that. I'm going to do some playing now to try and get the inevitable disappointment that sounded like me out of my head. But have you ever had an experience like this? I'd like to know your thoughts if I could have a bit of a chance to read through the comments. But yeah, basically, I don't think it sounds like Mick Taylor playing through that rig. And I've heard loads of people say this sort of thing before. I've not really had the experience. You know, you don't often get to plug into someone else's full rig and see what it sounds like, much less it be someone that you might have heard of or you've heard their playing and you admire their playing and that sort of stuff. So it was kind of interesting for me. It's like, oh, right, yeah, there is a point to this. And when people say, like, Nuno talks about plugging into Eddie Van Halen's rig and it just sounded like him, basically, You stare into the abyss long enough, 2-rock stares back at you, doesn't it? Anyway, I'm using the HX Stomp for this. I'm going to chuck a Clon and a Tube Screamer in front of the Grammatico Dumble clone, and we'll see what happens. If you want that tone, I'll chuck it into Gumroad. But yeah, let me know your thoughts if you've had experiences like this in the past. Do you sound unmistakably like you? The gear, certainly in this case, didn't seem to make as much of a difference as I thought it might.